Hello! Now, around about a year ago, actually, I think a year and a month to the date of this recording, I did a video, this video here on my channel, where I put together, my pedal board. My absolutely massive, weighs an absolute ton pedal board. And I'd started building this pedal board, really, when I got my first pedal, which is here. It's my Jim Dunlop Dimebag Dow Signature Crybaby from Hell. And I bought that all the way back in 2010 when I was a teenager. And I sort of got into pedals around that time and had this whole plan of building this massive pedal board. And it was around about 2011, maybe 2012, when I actually bought this physical board itself. At the time I also got it with this delay, my carbon copy delay, my Black Label chorus, and a Korg pitch black tuner. And it's been growing ever since. Well, last year I finished it. Was really proud of it. It was actually slightly before I filmed that video. I think it was around about the November before, because that video was done in February. And so it's been a bit of over a year, and I'm sick of it. And so I'm going to be rebuilding a whole new pedal board for two reasons in particular. One, carrying this thing. Now, I already have this amp behind me. This is a full stack, but I kind of only tend to gig with just half, obviously, because it's more sensible. And I've got a big heavy head up here as well. Got guitars to carry, PA. There's already a hell of a lot of awkward, heavy stuff to bring to a gig. I'm not completely going away from like amps. I know amp modelling is getting really, really, really good at the moment, but I'm going to be keeping the amps and I'm going to be downsizing this. The other reason is actually I've had so many faults with it. You see, I've had pedals breaking, or cables breaking. Sometimes I've had the cables break inside the pedal. That was a fun one that happened with my Boss acoustic simulator here. And even right now, this pedal board has a problem with it. Somewhere, one of the patch cables is broken. And let's have a quick look. We have 11 patch cables, 12 if you then count the one that plugs just the 2-foot switch into the HX Stomp here. So a hell of a lot of cables. And yeah, they have been breaking. Now I thought when I was putting this together that wouldn't be such a massive deal, as this pedal board, literally, everything, as you might be able to see, everything is zip tied on. I can literally tip the pedal board completely over like this, nothing's going to fall off. It's really nice and safe and secure, so I thought, I'm not taking anything off, I'm not constantly plugging and unplugging. The only ones that get bad are the ones at the end of the pedal chain or the effects loop. But no, things have gone wrong, and they have kept going wrong. And talking about the weight as well, I know I was bringing that up before how heavy this and awkward it is. The case this comes in, the straps are starting to break off it, it's so heavy. I've even had someone at one of the pubs I gigged at trip over it. Now he was already drunk, but he stumbled through and tripped over, beer went everywhere. Poor guy. He was alright in the end. But it's a bit of a massive hazard. So, here's where I'm going with this. A little while ago, about a year or two ago, I bought the Line 6, there it is, Line 6 HX Stomp, as a everything else pedal. So I was really, really keen on having individual pedals for particular effects, for most of my effects. And in fact, when I was first putting this pedal board together, I was a teenager, I was very impressionable by what I was seeing on the internet. I was very much going for an analog snob phase. Well, everything has to be analog, everything has to be true bypass, all this kind of stuff. Which, analog pedals are nice, but there's a lot of, I like to call it wood sniffing in guitar, where one person will say, oh, this type of thing is absolutely awful, you should never go for it ever, when oftentimes there's really good stuff for it as well. So I ended up having a bit of a mix of analog and digital here, but I wanted certain pedals for certain things, but I knew I couldn't have I say a huge pedal board, obviously this thing is absolutely massive, but I wanted something as a everything else effects pedal. So, for example, I don't really use phasers very often, but if I do a song that uses a phaser, I could just put it on there and just have one that I use for that and that only, rather than having a pedal that sits on my pedal board not really ever being used. And I played my friend Chris's one at the time, and he's a bass player, but he also does gigs as a guitar as well. He kind of just uses the same pedal board for both. And he said, this was years ago, ever since he bought that pedal, he's been slowly using his other pedals less. And I thought, nah, I won't be doing that. Well, it's so damn good, honestly. Once again, going into my whole analog snobbery when I was a teenager thing, I would have never have wanted to use an effect like a multi-effects. I would have thought, they're good, they're alright, they're good if that's all you can have, but they won't replace like everything else now. Today's day and age, like the Kemper stuff, the Line 6 stuff, the Axe Effect stuff, the, what is it, the Quad Vortex? I think that's what it is, stuff. It is not even that it's close to the original stuff. It is as good as it is. It now, at this point, it absolutely is bang on as good as the stuff that previously you'd have had everything individual for. So, what I'm going to replace this with is a Line 6 HX Effect. So you can probably tell that there's nothing in the box at the moment, hence I can chuck it around, because it's kind of heavy. So actually, let's grab the actual one. Here we go, with its bigger brother, the HX Effects. Now, I should put a caveat in there. It is not a true bigger brother to HX Stop, for one particular reason. As far as I know, this pedal will not do amp sims. So if you plan on having, amp and cab sims like IRs, going for a PA, this isn't the one you'd want. This is just pure effects. And as I'm still happily gigging with an amp, I'm going to be using this. As well as that, I get all my drive sounds from my amp, hence why I'm so connected to my amp. But I've got this, and I thought to go with it, I bought the Mission Engineering expression pedal for it. It's the one without the switch, but it should just be fine, just like that. I was looking at Line 6's official ones up here, and some people were just saying it wasn't very well built, plastic and stuff, and it should be fine, but really, and a pedal I'm leaning my whole weight on, in a gig scenario, I want it to last. As well as that Crybaby I pointed out has exactly the same construction as this. It's a typical Voxwar Crybaby metal construction. This is made in the States. And that pedal has now, it's going to be 14 years old this year, and it's still rocking. It's had drinks poured on it so many times, it's still going, so I thought, if I can go for something as strong as that, then that would be perfect. So, what I'm going to start doing now, I'm going to turn the camera off, and I'm going to start putting this whole thing together. So, my first port of call is going to be plugging this into the computer, updating the firmware on here, and then my first big thing to do. And the one thing that held me off for ages of getting a multi-effects, and that is getting it to sound exactly like this pedal. And this one too, but mostly this one. I absolutely love the MXR carbon copy analog delay. It is my favourite delay. It is my solo tone. I'll put it on every single time I play a solo lead line. It just fattens everything up. I call it a solo sweetener. Makes everything sound good. Just before I go to update the thing, I'll give you a bigger idea of the plan. I'm going to get a different board itself. So I'm hoping to get a much smaller board. And I'll show you when I'm lining it all up what I'm going to have. Now, power supply wise, I'm not quite sure what to do. I might just keep this one even though it's now going to be powering so many less things. From this pedal board, I'm going to be keeping the foot switch for my laning. Because like I said, I like to use the amps drives specifically. So I'll be using that. Although, a good thing about the HX stuff is if I'm using someone else's amp and I don't necessarily like the drive tones, I'm going to have drives set up on there as well. I'll be keeping my Boss wireless unit. And I'm going to be keeping my Crybaby. Because even though I've got the Mission Expression pedal, this is more to replace things like the whammy and other things. I want a pedal that is completely separate from the HX, because I use it so often that I can just switch in. The last one on here I'll be keeping is this one here. This is the MXR Smart Gate. It's a noise gate. Now the HX does have noise gates built in, but I need this one because I need to be able to adjust it easily on the fly, and I don't want to have to leave that for like the expression pedal. You see, there's different ways of using a noise gate. You can use it to stop noisy pedals. You can use it to choke the signal to make like that sort of like incredibly short gate, like gent metal sound. But I use it purely as feedback control to stop there being massive amounts of feedback in the room, especially when you have high gain amp like this being played really loud. Typically I'll have to adjust the sensitivity knob on there depending on how loud I'm playing that day, the size of the room I'm in, the height of the ceiling of the room I'm in, and the materials of the room. So for example, if the floor has a carpet or if it's like a wooden floor, all of that changes how the feedback reacts in the room and how much or how little feedback I'm going to get. So I'd like that on there so I can simply control it on the fly. So I'll be keeping the foot switch, the wah, the wireless, probably the power supply, and my noise gate. But other than that, everything else is going to be replaced with that HX. So now I'm going to plug it into my computer, update it all, and then I'm going to start working just off camera, and I'll show you a bit later, trying to get the HX effects to give me a delay exactly like the MXR carbon copy analog delay. I'll see you in a bit. I've just got myself a Line 6 HX effects, and I was just in the process of trying to sort of find similar sounds on this so I can replace these with this. And typically I like to use an effects loop with my amp. So I've always used the 4-cable method. So I decided to look up Line 6's method, and they do this as the 4-cable method. However, there seems to be a little bit of a problem with that. See, the problem is, it seems to actually just bypass the preamp section of my amp entirely. So I can strum, it still works, that's fine. And this is on the clean channel, so you expect it to sound like that. If I put it on the drive channel, there's more background noise, but it's still clean. If I put it on the super distortion mode, it's got all the fizz of a drive channel, but none of the sound. What's more than that, to prove it's definitely bypassed this, I can just unplug the amp from its input, and it's still working.
Several days later.
So here we are a couple of days later. What I've done is I have followed the instructions that come with the manual or the cheat sheet on their website, which I'll put on the screen now. But basically what it is I want to run the 4-cable method as I use my amplifier for its overdrive. I love the sound of my amp's drive channel. And so because I use the drive from the amp, any time-based or modulation effects, I need to run through the effects loop. Basically, this allows you to put an effect after the gain stages and the EQ of the amp, which is known as the preamp, which is where I get all the drive from, before it goes to the power stage, which is where the sound gets literally amplified, made louder. I did actually try running my effects straight into the amp, but the delay sounds just a little bit too aggressive. Without going into too much detail on it, if you look up on YouTube, delay before drive or delay after drive, you'll hear what I mean. I gave it a go. I thought I might just be able to go, HX straight in front of the amp. The effects, it doesn't sound as good. You see, the reason I was looking at that is the initial 4-cable method, the Line 6 recommend, has a couple of little issues. On this cheat sheet, it shows you a diagram, but as far as I can see, it doesn't really say how to actually set it up to work properly. Let me demonstrate. So what I have is, I've got my guitar plugged into the input, as you would expect, but then the output is plugged into the effects loop return on my amp. The effects send on the HX effects is going into the front end of my amp, and the return is going to the send of my loop. And I thought I might be able to plug that in, that'd be fine, but what's actually happening is this sound right here. Now that just might sound like a normal clean channel, and it should be, apart from if I switch to the overdrive channel of my amp, we're hearing a lot more fizz there, but if I strum, clean as a whistle. You see, what this setting alone has done is this has bypassed the preamp of my amp entirely. In fact, none of the controls in the front work, not even the volume, so I just have a very, very loud amp. It literally bypasses the whole of the front of the amp entirely, which I know some people have done. I think Ola Englands did a video where he made the Boss Metal Zone sound actually really, really good, plugging it into the return, and he was able to make that sound really good. But I bought an amp I really like, specifically for its drive channel that I really love, so I need to get this working with that. And so either my two options are try and fix the current situation, or run everything into the front, and as I said before, when I've tried everything in the front, the delays just come across as way, way, way too harsh. So I put a video up on my YouTube channel, and thank you to EveryChild9473, the account of a guy who said, "Hey Adam, you have to use an effects block and set where you want the effects to be in front of the loop, so you press your big button and scroll down until you see effects loop and add the block." So I thought, why not, on camera, let's try this together. So this is just the first default preset. I haven't set any presets yet, and I have it set up with my delay as I want to try and mimic how this sounds in this. So let's try that together. So I press the big button, and this is actually in the menu for all the modulation. So I'm going to press back, that gives me more type effect one, I'm going to press back again. So let's go delay, reverb, pitch synth, filter, wah, IR, volume pan, send return, that looks like it might be it. Press the big button and scroll until you see FX loop, and add the block. Aha, FX loop. So is that what we want? Will I now get the sound of my actual amp? If I switch to my drive channel, hey, there we go. back on the clean channel now. I should now be able to use the delay. Nicely. Let's try it in front of the distorted sound, see if this is ineffective or not. I've got to say there was a hell of a lot of noise in that. That said, I do have some slightly dodgy power in this room. Cool, so that seems to have set it up. I might just go on HX Edit, the Windows program, and just adjust this slightly. Given that I can put that block in there now, I'm going to try and set up some sounds I'd like to use. And my big thing is going to be seeing if I can mimic the carbon copy analog delay as closely as I can on the HX effects. I'll see you when I've got that. Right, what I've got here is I'm setting everything up here on HX Edit, and what I've done is I've got effects up here, which I'm going to keep on. I'm going to move this actually so you never see it, it's just always on. This obviously allows the amp to actually run the proper 4K method, so I can use my drive channel. I've got the volume down on the amp a bit at the moment, so it doesn't sound as full body as it normally does, and I got a bit of fizz from the dodgy power, but we're gonna power through. What I thought I'd set up here for you, to give us an example, is I have two delays here, and in HX Edit, they're actually both just the preset of the age-reactive delay. They're just straight up, they're exactly the same settings. This one comes before the loop, meaning this one is actually going directly into the front of the amp. This one is in the effects loop. Now, if we do a bit of clean, what you typically want to have is in the effects loop. But here, I have it before. In clean, they sound pretty identical. Do some notes. Versus. Slight difference in notes there. You might notice that the one that comes before the amp is a little bit more pronounced. Let's bring a bit of drive in, just a little bit of grit. Before the amp. Effects loop. You hear that one, how it sounds compared to this one is way more pronounced. In clean, you don't hear it too much, but with drive it's starting to come through a little more. If I do some notes, by the way, without delay, I'm playing this. So once again, in front of the amp. Effects loop. You get a cool delay, but it's not so messy. Let's up the ante a little bit. To my ear, it's a little bit warmer, a little bit less harsh, and it doesn't make everything sound too messy. If I do some like noodling again, so if I do without, if I do like effects loop, front of the amp. Once again, let's try that again. Effects loop. I mean, it's kind of cool. It gives you like that sort of chaotic, like long Pink Floyd instrumental sound. But for my usage, in front of the amp is just too harsh. So here I am again, and as you might be able to tell, I've been doing a bit more experimenting. I've added a couple of things to this. I've got some octaves, so I've got octave up, mix and octave down mix. Quite handy for things if I'm playing up. So say I'm playing really high, and I want to double it. Same thing if I'm playing low. Might want to go. I always find octaves up far, far harsher, so I'm trying to sort of tame that one a little bit. Back to the delays. I've actually been able to get it pretty damn close. On the Line 6 forum, people were saying to use the Adriatic delays. That's what I've got. So if we have the carbon copy, just on a clean G. You might notice the delays are more pronounced on here, but actually I quite like them on there. It's got it a little bit different, but I'm not saying... But I quite like it. Something I struggled with was analog warmth. Now I know for some people that's kind of like, oh really, but it does sound a little bit different. Let me demonstrate. I'll put the Adriatic on its previous settings on. So now listen to the difference. Notice how much lighter, I'm not sure if it's going to come from the camera, how much brighter those delays are. What I've done is I've changed the bucket brigade size to a lower one. It comes out a little bit warmer. The bucket brigade sizes they offer you for this effect are 1024, 2048, 4096 and 8192. And it's on 4096 by default. I brought that down a little bit and it just warms up a little bit. I've definitely got an extra bit of feedback on there, but I kind of like that actually, a bit more delay. So I do like a... So occasionally I like to use it with riffs. Like if I'm playing some Black Sabbath or Devin Townsend stuff. I know this isn't nearly as dramatic as his delays, but... I'm doing like, yeah, like a... I think just a little bit more tinkering we need, and I think I'll have that pretty much solid. What I've also discovered that I'm really happy with, I typically have used a black label chorus and a flanger. And my favourite flanger sound of all time is the flanger sound that the guitarist from Status Quo, Rick Parfitt, gets at the beginning of Whatever You Want. And this, to me, sounds basically dead on. That's actually just the default setting of 70s chorus. The chorus as well I have running behind the effect loop, and these other ones I've got running ahead of it. So yeah, it's looking really good. What I'm gonna do is I have a whole lot of different scenarios I need to make presets for. And in fact, when I was using the HX Stomp, I had a lot of presets set specifically for harmonizing. So I had a bank set up for every single possible key, major and minor, all of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a load of default sets where these two are always going to be a chorus and this delay. And no matter what bank I'm using, those two will be exactly the same, as they're the two pedals I use all the time, apart from my wah. So yeah, we're going to start experimenting a little bit more. I think my next protocol is going to be trying to put the whole pedalboard together, and then really I need to order a new pedalboard because my current one, well, it's a bit too big really. So a little bit later in the day now, and still got that grounding issue unfortunately with the electricity in this room, but I now have a whole preset set up for a gig I have coming up, which is actually not going to be using my amp, so I could just use an overdrive for E2 on here, which I've just made. I don't normally use an overdrive from anything else, I tend to use my own, but... In fact, if I put it on clean, I can get pretty dribble from there. I've got basically everything I need set up for that gig. And this is going to be the template for all my other presets. So every single preset is going to have these two. And this is the Adriatic delay, basically with only a few minor tweaks and just setting the bucket brigade a little bit lower. And the 70s chorus, I think actually this is just standard. This is just default as it comes. I love this sound so much. And comparing it to my black label chorus, it doesn't sound too different actually. It's one of those things where it sounds a little bit different, like the delay, but would I notice the difference blindfolded? I'm actually not sure I would. And it's one of those ones where the more and more I use this, the less I'll think about the other one. So, I've got my delay. My chorus. Then I have octave up, octave down, and I actually played that an octave higher, that second one, and then the whammy setting to replace my Digitech whammy. So in the current setting I have it at, I've just got it to go up 2 octaves with the expression pedal. So the expression pedal here is the Mission Engineering one. If I press it down, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. But if I pop this on, it's going to give me that Tom Morello-esque up 2 octaves. Try doing that one-handed. And that should set me up quite nicely for the new set. And I've also got the tuner built in, obviously. I didn't like its original display type, which is the fine one, with the second bit, so I've just put it on coarse, which is just standard tuner. As much as I've loved my Korg pitch black tuner, I will be replacing it. But yeah, this is now set up. So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to unplug this all, pack it down, and I'm going to put it together with my other wah, with my foot switch, and with my noise gate, and my wireless system, and I'm going to put it all in one place, measure it up, and then see if I can order myself a new, smaller pedal board to put it all on. So this is now a day later. I've got at least one full preset, like full bank, of the HX effects sorted out, and this is how the pedal board's going to be when it's all done. I've ordered a new power supply. I have the chocolate already. I did a video just here on it, but yeah, it's going to be way too big to mount to anything I want to do now. So I bought a smaller one, but one that can still power this. So I've bought the Chocs DC7, I believe it is. And I was looking at actual pedal boards. Now, this is where things got a bit tricky and a little bit interesting. The actual length this way I need the pedal board to be, rather than the width. We're going to call it length and width. It needs to be quite long, actually, as I'm going to have this foot switch here followed by these expression pedals. Then pretty much all the pedal boards I could find that are of that length are of this width, which isn't really what I wanted. I found one or two, and they were the metal pedal boards. And as cool as they look, I find trying to mount stuff to them to be a bit of a pain. You see, Velcro is where they go. And I've used Velcro ones before, and Velcro always seems to fall off for me. That's one small thing, but it gets a bit annoying for certain things like my Laney foot switch, which is completely covered in, what is this, like felt? You can see I've tried cutting it off before, but I've never been able to get this to fully come off this pedal. So I used to have like a Velcro strip stuck to it, but it doesn't stick to this material very well, so this used to always fall off. As well as that, a well-known issue is the feet on things like Crybabies, and the Mission Engineering expression pedal has the same thing, where you can take these feet off, but the screws that are underneath them that hold the actual bottom plate on are too long. Now there are mounting, there's mounting brackets, mounting hardware you can get for it to be able to Velcro it on, but to get that many, they're kind of expensive, and the HX Effects also has those style of feet. So I was in a little bit of a conundrum, until I decided to put all them on the pedal board and have a look underneath. You see, this is a wooden pedal board. What I preferably wanted is this. You can probably see holes here, where I'd previously drilled and then zip-tied everything down. I'd quite like to zip-tie everything again. Well, this is quite hard to do one-handed. If I lift the pedal board, you can see that there are 1, 2, 3 supports, but there's a lot of excess space. Well, what I'm thinking is, if I cut the edges off, just where the supports are, so keep the supports on there, so still support 1, support 2, and support 3, I might be able to pretty much make this pedal board the right size. It might be slightly wider than I wanted it to be, but pretty much the right size. Because remember, part of it's wanting this to be lighter, as well as that, a part of this is wanting it to be actually thinner and smaller. So, I'm going to see if I can cut that down to size. Well, this is quite a little bit later now, and the pedal board has been cut down to size. So I got my friend Felix to do it. Shout out Felix, he's done a bang-up job of this. I'm actually quite glad that I got him to do it, because he does carpentry as a hobby, so he's actually quite good at this stuff. It's cut how I said it was going to be done in the video earlier. If I flip it over, you can see the supports here. It's cut right down to the edge there. However, I didn't realise there were screws holding these supports in, that as soon as I brought it to him, he started feeling for and realised I was probably going to literally try to cut straight through some screws. So I was definitely going to mess this up. And he's done a really quite clean job here. He's taken the Tolex, like this material that goes around the edge of things like pedal boards and amps, and he's made it look like it was always supposed to be there. And yeah, I'm really quite pleased with it actually. He's done a really good job. Shout out to Felix there. Thank you, mate. So now we have the board, and we're going to start putting it together. So as I mentioned before, I need a new power supply. I now have said power supply. This is the Chox DC7, and it's going to give me all the power I need for everything I'm putting on here. I also made an additional purchase. You might have noticed earlier that I had this little 2-switch foot switch. And in my old pedalboard, I was using this to switch between like the presets I'd made on my HX Stomp. And I was planning on doing the same thing for the HX Effects. But I found something that actually might be a bit more useful. And really on the HX Effects, I find changing the presets easier to do. You can do it from the actual switches on the amp rather than the little buttons, which really in the middle of a song you don't want to press the little buttons, whereas I can foot switch it up easily. So I might not have enough space for this left. That's all. So I'm going to take that off. And in its place, I have one of these. So this is, I see them being referred to as like a pedalboard patch bay box or a junction box. This is actually custom made by Lazy Bear Effects. You can find them on Reverb. Made in Britain. Really, really nice company to deal with actually. I just messaged, because normally he sells these where it's just 4 mono jacks in and out. But I need a MIDI for the foot switch for my amp. And I just asked him, can you do it? And he was like, yep, easy. And he made a custom listing on Reverb, 45 quid. Can't argue with that. It came pretty quickly, all works perfectly well. Now, the reason I would need this is, if I move this out of the way for a moment, if I have that at the end there, I am running the 4-cable method. Now, one of the cables I have to worry about, as I have my wireless, so that'll be going through anyway, so that's taken one out. I still have 4 to deal with though, because I've got a foot switch I'm using. Because remember, I like to use my amp's reverb and my amp's distortion, and with my foot switch for my amp, I can quite easily switch these off and on. So, I need the 4-cable method, and with the HX Effects, if I whip it out quickly, there are quite a lot of ins and outs on here. And if I'm going to have this around about here on the pedalboard, it's going to be quite difficult to get cables in and out with other stuff around it. You know, without breaking things, without it getting in the way. And with my last pedalboard, I did have that as a bit of a problem. So, everything's going to plug into this, and the only interfacing I'm going to do with the pedalboard will be by using the receiver. Failing that, I have my wah pedal on the side here, I'll have a spare cable I'll plug right into the wah on the side. Other than that, I'm only ever going to plug things into this box. So I'm going to have, for the foot switch, amp, and then effects send, effects return. So at this point, let me show you exactly how I'm going to have the pedalboard arranged. So here it is, how it's going to be set up going forward. And doesn't this look so much neater and tidier than my previous setup? So here's how it's going to run. It's going to be wireless unit first, and I've bought myself a nice extra long cable to go from the output of here. It's going to go round into the Crybaby from Hell. Then that is going to have a cable out going down through here into the HX Effects. I'm going to have all the effects loop stuff going in and out to this box, apart from one of them, the one that's going to go into the front of the amp, which will first go into the MXR Smart Gate and then out into the patch bay. And that'll be it. There's going to be a cable going from the HX to the expression pedal here, this is just for the line 6. And obviously I'm going to have a MIDI cable running to that box there. I'm hoping actually, because I'm going to need to buy a little MIDI patch cable, like a short one. Because lo and behold, my new band Foundry, we've been given our first gig slightly sooner than I was expecting. And so it is currently Tuesday, and we have a gig on Saturday. So I'm, at this point, really going to need to put this pedal board together right now. So at this point, what I want to start doing is I want to get my drill out, and I am going to start drilling holes in here so I can start zip tying everything else down. One other thing though, you might have noticed, I haven't brought this in yet. Well, I was hoping to do this with the previous power supply, the Chox Chocolate, the really, really massive one, but it could never fit under this pedal board. But my hope now is if I flip it, I'm going to have it mounted here. And so all I need to do is just run a kettle lead just through this little hole here, and this little archway is always on there, so I can easily get a cable through there, plug it in. This is going to be mounted underneath there as well, and everything's going to be plugged through, coming through this slit here. So yeah, the next time we see this pedal board, we're going to have everything mounted and bolted to the board. Here we go. So now fast forwarding even more time since the last clip, and everything is set up mostly. Mostly everything is wired up, everything has power, and apart from one missing patch cable at the moment, everything has been wired up and works. And in fact, this rig has now actually been tested by being gigged. But we're not done just yet. There's a couple more things to go. You see, at that gig, I realised that there were a couple of issues with my signal dropping in and out. Now there's a couple of things it could be. I'm really hoping it's not the amp, as I had that service recently. And I'm actually currently waiting for the postman to arrive for my patch cable to go from my foot switch to the junction box here. But the other thing I've just gone out to the shops for is I will be replacing the patch cables going from my pedals into the junction box with some self-cutting ones. Now I was hoping actually not to need to do self-cutting ones, but really it's these ends I want. The straight jacks that aren't like these ones where they're really, really long, and as you can see, if I try to plug it in, it actually can't fit next to the pedals. Because if I have loads of right angle ones, they all sort of go over each other like this, and when I sort of try to close the case on it, it ends up leaning on the cables, it's going to break the cables. So I've got some of the solderless, cut them yourself kind of ones. Now I looked at two other brands. There's one which, the name escapes me now, but it begins with an E and they're really expensive. They were like 80, 90 quid for a set. And I was looking at the Boss ones, didn't hear many good things about it. So I'm actually going for an even cheaper brand. Well, it was in the shop at the time. This is Joyo. Let's give them a go. Let's see how it goes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be cutting 3 different cables. One is going to go from my MXR noise gate to the top of the junction box, and as you can see, it's already a very, very short cable, and we have a super short cable there. Then one is going to go from the mono output of the HX effects into, and this is coming into the effects return, I believe. And then I need another one going out of the return of the HX effects into the middle one here, which is going into the effects send on my amp. Yeah, it's a bit of a convoluted system. So I'm going to try my luck now at actually cutting these. Let's see how that goes. Right, let's try this together, shall we? So this will be a bit of a laugh. So the instructions say, cut the cable to the desired length using the included cable cutter, which I have. I was actually thinking of getting myself another pair of wire cutters. I'm actually glad I have a set of these now. Insert the cable into the 1/4 inch plug, push it firmly and give it a slight left and right turn to make sure the connection is made. Now bend the cable into the opening of the plug, attach the metal cap. Use the included small screwdriver to attach the screw and hold the cap in place, and then repeat on all the other ones. So we've got a set of wire cutters here. There is indeed a little screwdriver. I have 3 meters of cable here, and then here's the big bit. Here are the things you want, these ends, which, as you can see, I should be able to fit right in there like that. Look how low profile that is in there. So this does split apart into 2 bits, and then there's a little bag for screws. Let's try it first, going from there to there. This is the cable length we have. I actually don't even need it to be this long. Even shorter than that will do quite nicely. Let's measure it up, just that amount. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut the end of this bit off, just in case there's too much of it already. So there's one end cut. Just double check the length, that should be fine. Hopefully there's plenty so I can have room margin of error. There we go, I've now cut 2 ends. Let's get my first bit, insert the cable into the plug. Push it in firmly and give it a slight right and left turn to make sure a connection is made. Now bend the cable into the opening for the plug. Attach the metal cap. So I've just making sure I've bent it through this little slot here, attaching the metal cap. And now I just need to get one of the little screws from the little bag. Let's put it in there. I've got to say, the cable goes a lot deeper into the jack than I was expecting. Let's grab another end. Let's push this one in. Pushing that in all the way. Give it a left, give it a right. Bend it through the thing. Put the cap on it. Let's grab a screw, and I'm going to screw it in. There we go. Screw it all in. But let's see how it goes. So we've got ourselves a dinky little patch cable there. Let's plug this in. There we go. There's a little bit on top, a little bit of play. It's actually, I could have made the cable shorter if I really wanted to. Right, there we go. I'm going to make 3 more now, and then I've got my amp all ready and set up here, and I will test to see if, well, any and all of these have actually worked or not. There we go, I've just finished attaching all the solderless Joyo cables. Gotta say, those screws are really, really fiddly. I ended up losing 3 of the screws. Found them all again, so I've got one from the HX to the MXR, one from the MXR to the junction box, and then 2 from the Line 6 to the junction box there. And what's just come in the post is the MIDI patch cable. So, the point of this one is going to be that I can have my foot switch for my amp, which is controlled by MIDI, connected to the MIDI in the custom junction box, and then I would just connect my normal cable for the foot switch right there. So these are my Boss, and the good thing about them is you can set them to go right angle, which really would be quite beneficial with this. So here we go, here's the MIDI patch cable. So you need to work out, so you can unscrew, oh I see how you can do it. So you can just bend them in place like that. So one end of this is going to go in there. I guess I really want to twist this round and have the right angle going the other way. So preferably like to have it going through, I'll wrap it under there. So we're going through to, we go to this socket right here. Very, very big connector. I forget how large the MIDI connector is, or 5-pin DIN, as you prefer to call it. Okay, that's in now. Right angle from that end. Okay, there we go. So this is going to need a little bit of tidying up, but first things first, I'm now going to plug this all into my amp and just make sure that all the connections actually work. And so there we are, these cables are a success. I'm actually quite surprised by that because I thought I was going to really mess it up. So this is the pedal board. The only other thing I need to do at this point after testing this is to zip tie together all the cables, just to tidy them up a little bit, but everything is now set and ready to go. I'll have a quick run through of the pedal board anyway. So, I've got my landing foot switch, which controls reverb. A bit more drive, if I want it. Slightly grittier one there. I could then go into the drive channel, which is going to be like a crunch sound. Or a bit more distortion. I then have kept my wah pedal the same. And then go over to the line 6, I've got a delay. That delay, we now have a delay. I have chorus. I have, on this first setting, a drive, just in case I'm using a different amp, I need to get a bit more gain. Just on the off chance. Then when the expression pedal comes in, is if I put it on whammy mode. So this gives you the typical sort of Rage Against the Machine sound of just going up 2 octaves. Then I have an octave down and an octave up. Other than that, on my pedal board, I've got myself my wireless receiver, which is the first in the signal, and my noise gate, and then everything else is going into the junction box. But that'll be all for today. So here is my brand new pedal board. So if you enjoyed, please consider liking, sharing and subscribing, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.